It's been going good. I mean, she's great. She's definitely keeps me on my toes, and it's funny. We're definitely adjusting to like the lifestyle of like you make plans and then she decides that we're not going to do that. So, but no, I mean it's great. It's pretty incredible to see a little human just kind of looking up at you. Just you're kind of their world at first. It's a real trip, man. I'm loving it.
Yeah. How old is she now?
She's almost 7 months. On the 20th, she'll be 7 months.
Okay. So still so young.
Oh yeah, freshy.
Yeah, it's freshy. Yeah, it's crazy. My brother has 2 kids now. I think one's 5 or 6, and
Okay.
I'm just like, I'm not having kids myself, so I'm just like, so when can like they go out and do stuff with you? He's like, I don't know, it's gonna be a couple of years. I'm like, wow, it's so long. It's a long time.
Yeah. I mean, I think like parents will take their kids out as as early as they can, but I'm starting to realize that that's kind of like more about the parents than it is about the kids.
Because they're not even gonna remember it, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Like this holiday season, we're like, oh, it's your first, Christmas and New Year's. And she's just like, nah, has no idea what's going on. Yeah.
How does it work though? So they might not actually have like memory of it, right? But are those experiences still formative in a way? Like how do you balance that as a parent?
Yeah, I think that's a really trippy thing, like I've heard on some sides, like the part of their brain that develops memory hasn't really like formed yet. But then again, like people talk about trauma happening, much earlier on. So it's kind of like this shitty situation where like they're not going to remember it if it's good, but if it's bad, like it'll stick with them. I don't know. Yeah. So we're trying to just keep it good for her,
Yeah. They're just little trauma sponges.
Yeah, I mean they really are sponges, man. They'll just watch you. I mean, it's most intimidating when you're like looking at your phone or something, and then you see make contact with them. You're like, oh my god, they're like already ingrained to this world that we live in now.
Yeah,
it's a trip.
Have you and your wife talked about the phone policy with the kid?
No, we have a little bit, like we kind of just like try to do it with each other too. Like when we're eating dinner together, we try not to like, have our look at our phones and stuff like that. Obviously we're not super great at it all the time, but yeah, we're not like being super religious really about anything, but yeah, I don't think we really want to like have her totally. We're not going to be. I don't think we're going to be like putting a phone or, I might be eating my words, but I don't think we're going to be like putting like a phone in front of her to entertain her.
Yeah.
It's another one of these weird things where it's like you don't want them to be. You want them to enjoy like the real world, as it is, but you also don't want them to be like behind in this kind of just like super fast-paced technology driven world that we're now in. Yeah,
it's a conundrum for sure.
Balance,
Godspeed.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. I'll let you know how it goes, or she will.
Please do.
20 years from now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Nice, dude. Well, I mean, I just want to, officially welcome you to the show, man. I'm super psyched that you're here, and
thanks for having me.
Really cool. I came across your story. It was Climbing Mag, right? That published the story.
Yeah.
Or was it?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's kind of a nice.
Yeah, I saw
piece.
that article and I saw the Instagram post, and what really looped me in was like they really leaned into the fact that like you were just kind of like labeled as like an average Joe, and you were just like putting up super hard first ascents. I'm like, hey, this is the majority. This is the guy. We got to get him on. And so
I appreciate that.
I'm psyched you're here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, psyched to be here. Yeah,
cool, man. So I mean, I think that a great place to start is just to kind of get a background on who you are, man, and just get a foundation for everything before we dive into the stories and bring it to the present day. So let's just dive into your childhood. Maybe a heavy question, but like, what was that like, and kind of how did that lead you to climbing?
Okay. Well, I grew up in a foreign service family. My dad was a diplomat, and so I kind of from year one I grew up abroad. Um, so I was just kind of bouncing around from country to country every like 1 to 3 years, and that was definitely unique and pretty uh, just everything was just kind of like moving so fast. It was, I think the first thing that everyone thinks about when you like kind of grow up in that environment is like, oh, you get to see the world, you get to go to all these cool places and stuff like that. But it was, we were just kids. And so like all of this stuff was happening to us, but we were just, I'm still kind of processing that childhood now. But
What do you remember most from it? Like, I guess not like a specific moment, but like something that you still carry with you, I guess, from the experience.
Well, there were definitely some places that we lived that were super formative. Like I lived in Madagascar for 2 years, and that really kind of created this passion for nature for me. It was just the timing of my childhood that I lived there, where I was just so curious and just kind of discovering the world. Um, and then to be in a place where, I had like chameleons in my backyard and, walking around wild lemurs and stuff like that. It was really, just, it just kind of created this passion for nature and just made me want to like enjoy that for the rest of my life. And so that kind of drove me to, like what I chose to study in school and all that stuff.
What did you study?
Ecology and evolution.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Don't use it. I wanted to be David Attenborough, but still working on it.
Nice.
Got to go gray first, or white rather.
You got to go white first for sure. You got to work on the accent too. You got a ways to go there.
Wear the same shirt,
I don't think they've found a replacement for him yet.
Hopefully they never do, man.
I know,
don't
right?
know if you can ever replace that guy.
The AI technology is probably good enough where they just take his voice and create like a digital record of it, and then they can just write a script and have the AI read it for him.
Yeah. I'm sure those documentaries are already out, yeah.
Yeah, so you said your father was a foreign diplomat, is that correct?
He was a foreign service officer.
Service officer. So I'm I guess a bit ignorant to what exactly that means.
Yeah, so basically the US in particular has kind of, they either have bases or embassies or foreign service institutes everywhere. They're all over the world. And those are basically manage US foreign relations. And so that can be anything from like just like issuing visas, working with humanitarian efforts, things like USAID, missionary groups, the Peace Corps, all the way to highly militaristic zones where their diplomatic relations are very touch and go and very serious. So it can be anything from like super, like places like Madagascar where just having a presence is good, but it's not going to affect like world politics, to like the US embassy in, I don't know, Paris. That the ambassadors, what they do will make world news and affect things like that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Were you an only child through this experience as well?
No, I had an older brother and a younger sister, and they were kind of, our family unit kind of stayed together throughout all this, and so they were kind of like this little like island that I stayed on my whole life. And they were kind of like the only solid ground I had really in my upbringing. So it wasn't until I came to Colorado for university that that I really kind of like started to create a place that I could call home, outside of my immediate family.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. So that was definitely a challenge, but
Yeah, just like not having a sense of like a location to call home in a sense.
Yeah, not just that, but just like community too. It was like
Yeah.
1 year to 3 years is like just about as long as it takes to like start really forming some kind of lasting relationships, and then it would just be like, and this was like before Facebook and stuff, so, and Instagram and all that stuff, so it was just like, okay, bye, see you never.
Yeah.
And I had to do that just over and over again, and then it actually kind of created this like kind of ghost complex that I had to like work through in my adulthood, just like, oh, I'm not just like, I don't just like disappear. I'm like, I'm not just like floating. I can like, have a community, and I can have lasting relationships beyond like a couple of years,
Yeah, did it start to discourage you from like creating friendships? Like almost like, oh, it's not even worth it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was tough, man. It's really weird because it's like something that I would hear from people and friends that were, grew up in environments where they, grew up around their friends, and, they've known them for 30 years. I was like, man, I'd kill for that. I don't even know what that feels like, that was the exact opposite. So it actually like took some really like conscious effort to learn to kind of change that and to like invest in my relationships,
Yeah, I can understand that for sure. I did some traveling myself throughout North America. I kind of lived in a different city every 6 months, and same kind of thing, like not really establishing relationships with people. Like even in the digital presence, it's like, yeah, okay, follow you on Instagram, but it's like, there's a difference between like, oh, hey, we hang out and climb once, or to someone like, hey, like, let me come visit you from another state. Like, hey, let's, we chat on, WhatsApp, or, like we call every month or whatever. Like those kind of lasting relationships take time, like you said, and they're extremely valuable.
For sure.
Especially just not only for, your own personal development, but I don't know, like in a business sense, like networking, like having a community, people, like, we're only as strong as the people we surround ourselves with. And if you're on an island, it's like, you can only really, raise yourself up as much as you can.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's something I'm still learning and working on. Yeah.
So when you're still in Colorado, correct?
Yeah.
And so when you moved to Colorado for school, and you've stayed there since.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And how much time has there been since you school and now?
Man, it's almost 20 years now. I don't know, 18 years. Yeah.
Okay. So you got a good community now, I would hope.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean,
Nice.
I met my wife here, and, we got a kid, and I've got, I've definitely got a community. Yeah. It's, I've kind of, I mean, this is a nice thing about growing up, is like you can kind of like look down the well and, work on your problems, Yeah.
Did you find like community in climbing, or did you find community kind of before, and kind of like, how did you find climbing?
I've definitely found community in climbing. How I found climbing is really kind of interesting. It's like this, I've had all these like little glimpses of like experience with climbing in my childhood. Times where I was kind of exposed to it. But I was still like at this point where I was just kind of discovering myself and discovering the world. So I was just soaking it all in, trying everything, sucking at a lot of things. But climbing was definitely one of these things where I just like really appreciated being outside, and something about like the movement of it worked for me. I was never like super fast, but I could kind of persist, and I found that climbing that kind of like works with climbing. And I think really early on was impressed by like how you could like meet an obstacle and not necessarily be able to do it right away, but then somehow just like, you know, do it with effort, and I really liked that. But yeah, I didn't really embrace it until I was 17, when I visited. My brother actually came out here too for school, and he like showed me rock climbing for the first time because he was being shown it, and I was like, oh my god, this is so cool. And so I was actually living in France at the time, and I was like, oh, I should try to climb, I should boulder. And I was like, I wonder if there's anywhere that there's bouldering nearby me. And I was, Google searched, and I was like, oh, there's this place called Fontainebleau that's nearby. So, like bought a crash pad and got on the metro, and that was where I started climbing, was just scrapping around boulders in Fontainebleau.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kind of a world-class area to start, no?
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to go back, dude, because I mean, I was awful back then, and it'd be cool to actually like be able to do some of the climbs now.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But yeah, I just got super, super into it, super obsessed. Started bouldering, and then just kind of like progressed and wanted to start using ropes and stuff like that. And so I started sport climbing, and then I was like, well, you can only do like routes that have bolts on them. And I was like, well, what if you want to like climb that piece of rock and there aren't bolts on it? And I was like, oh, you have to learn how to trad climb. And so, I got a hand-me-down rack from my old boss, and yeah, went. I think my first lead was like a 5.5, and I was super gripped and sewed it up, and yeah, just worked my way up from there.
So I think, there's typically you have boulders, sport climbers, trad climbers. And I feel like trad climbers, sometimes they'll sport climb and sometimes they're like, oh, I never boulder. Like if people find their categories, right?
Yeah.
So starting as a boulderer, like, I guess you kind of answered it, but like, how do your progression and leaving, not necessarily leaving it behind, but like evolving your progression as a climber towards trad climbing, like what about climbing, or what about the experience did it like draw you? And what do you think, how do you think like certain people stay away from that kind of development? Like where do you see that lie?
Well, I think a lot of people like to operate within like a zone that's comfortable for them. And so, maybe people that are like really naturally strong are like, oh, I can do these sick boulders and, get my feelings of accomplishment from that without, deviating. But I always kind of, I guess like being so familiar with change growing up, like I've always kind of like wanted to stimulate myself. And I just kind of saw the other domains of climbing as like an opportunity to learn more and become more skilled and stuff like that. And, I had big aspirations to, be like hardcore alpinist and stuff like that. But since then, I've kind of pumped the brakes a little bit. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
got.
I think
stuff to live for.
I remember like just getting into trad climbing, and like I looked at Cerro Torre and I was just like, that's what I want to climb.
Right. Yeah.
Just like having no fucking idea like what it is you even trying to do. Not to say that it's not possible, but our delusions of grandeur are strong in the beginning.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and yeah, I mean, I think that's a little bit of a different story. I think that more has to do with objective and subjective risk. And hopefully we can go into that little bit later, but I think it, you know it. I think that you can definitely get into the world of trad climbing, and that's such a broad term too, right? But like learning to use all of the gear that's available to you is, I think it's a useful, um, means to an end. It just allows you to be more like proficient and more competent, in various terrain.
Yeah. So what was your like? Did you have a mentor? Were you self taught? Like your brother introduced you, but like after that, and like you got a hand me down rack. Like did someone walk you through? Did you have a mentor? How was that like?
I didn't really have any mentors. I did have one, this woman, Quinn Brett. Yeah, she definitely taught me a decent amount of like climbing, um, kind of like more advanced skills, like big simul climbing and stuff like that. And then when I was kind of exposed to the world of climbing rangering, I had another buddy who, kind of became one of my like really good partners. This guy's Kevin Sturmer. He was another climbing ranger. He kind of like helped me, kind of like again learn some more like advanced skills in climbing. But yeah, I was never really like taken under the wing as some of these like origin stories you hear of. I really had to like learn a lot of this stuff myself, through trial and error. Um, and that was okay with me. I mean, it was like it felt very linear, not necessarily on purpose, but I just kind of like would be curious about something and doing something a certain way, and then I would, try to kind of fulfill the desire, or like learn a new skill, whether it was like using cams and falling on gear, to like placing micro wires, to like, I don't know, hammering in pitons and drilling bolts on lead and stuff like that. Yeah, it's all just kind of like happened organically.
It seems like you've kind of took it as like a pragmatic approach and very safety conscious, and just kind of like tested the limits in a safe way. I think that that's not always the case, especially when you're trying to teach yourself. It's like very, who said this? It's like you don't know what you don't know if you don't know that you don't know it.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it's like, you don't really know what you're risking if you don't know what the risk is. And I think that's pretty like easy to fall into when you're trad climbing, because you never fall on, you don't really know what the risks are. And so you kind of just throwing yourself out there, and you're like, okay, this cam works like this and that works like this. And you kind of, get lucky along the way. Do you feel like you had any close calls as like a budding trad climber, like any, stark realizations early on where you're just like, whoa, like this is actually kind of dangerous. I need to like,
oh my God. Yeah. For sure. Ironically, I actually early on, I don't think it was as bad as like, kind of in that sweet spot, that like kind of like sophomore year time, where it's like just enough to get yourself killed kind of thing, where
yeah,
you're
so like 6 months to 12 months in, or
oh no, I mean it was definitely a couple of years for me that I was
okay.
like really starting to use gear and stuff, but like more just like, I'd done my fair share of free soloing and kind of like big simuls, and climbing in objective hazard and stuff like that. And I think during the time that I was doing those, there was the prevailing kind of defense was that, oh, you just don't fall. And looking back on that now, I just realize how dumb that was. And I've kind of witnessed firsthand the you know all aspects of the outcomes of ignoring that. So now I try to be a lot more intentional. Yeah.
Did you have any like specific moments, like maybe like a quick short story of like a specific moment where you had like a personal close call on like a realization of like, whoa, I was a little close?
I mean, a lot of the times that I went free soloing, I was like, oh, I should be a free soloer. I should be good at this. I'm skilled. This is like one of the skills that you need to have as a all around climber. And I really wanted to be an all around climber. And then, um, I would be several hundred feet up, like, fuck, this is like so sketch. And like, man, I could be like super run out with a harness and rope, and, it would be totally comfortable, but just
Totally.
like being unroped, I was just like, oh my God. And yeah, after doing that enough times, I kind of realized that it's like, this isn't for me. I shouldn't be doing this, and I can fall. And like, yeah, I mean, I never really had like any particular incidences other than like, I don't know, like I've done approaches to reach a climb like in Patagonia, and then like you're higher up on the wall and you like see a giant serac fall like had swept through your tracks, stuff like that. Those kinds of things are a little bit sobering in the sense that you're just like, wow, if I was there then I would be here now,
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting the free solo thing where it's like you didn't have like a foot slip or double feet slip and you're like hanging on by one hand and you're like, wow, that was way too close. It's like, just the sheer exposure and just the sheer reality of like what you're doing is just like, this is kind of fucked, like, I don't know if I should be doing this. Yeah. And it's funny though, like you said, like, you could be 30 feet run out on a trad climb, with a piece, 30 feet down, and it's kind of the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
you're, at least in my head, when I'm in a situation like that, for me, it's like, this is a no fall zone. Like I consider myself soloing,
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah, the rope might save you from dying, but what did someone say is like, if I can't climb, I might as well be dead anyway.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a little bit dramatic, but what kind of life do you want, right? It's like, do you want to be maimed and in a wheelchair, or do you want to like, continue climbing, or at least living some sort of positive life? So yeah, free soloing is just kind of like a zero-sum game.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think really what did it for me in the end was just like, I can justify, the world is full of risks and climbing is full of risks and stuff like that, but I just don't feel like I would want to leave behind, my loved ones, just like, oh yeah, I went free soloing when I didn't have to. I could have just gone climbing, and I got wrecked. That just felt like I couldn't. I couldn't justify it. So yeah, I stopped.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So your experience with SAR, I kind of want to dive into that. We've talked about risk a little bit, and I feel like I want to expand on, your experience with that. And yeah, I think it's an interesting perspective because, you said you haven't had a lot of close calls yourself, but, in SAR, I would imagine you've had a lot of experience witnessing, other people's mistakes. And so, I'd love to dive into, your experience there. Before, we go into the specific experiences and stuff, like how did you get started? Like what was the story behind like choosing to go into that path?
You might not know this, but I send professional recording equipment to every single guest to ensure top tier video and audio quality. And those costs add up. Right now, this podcast is also ad free, and I would love to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help cover shipping costs and keep this podcast ad free, please consider joining our Patreon. With as little as $3 a month, you can help support the show. You can find the link in the description below or go to patreon.com/the Climbing Majority Podcast. That's patreon.com/the Climbing Majority Podcast.
Well, I was always kind of interested in it, actually. I mean, for a really long time, I wanted to try to figure out some sort of career path that was associated with climbing. And, I got a couple of like after I graduated from college, with my bachelor's, I had a couple of jobs, at the Mountain Research Station, close to the Continental Divide in Colorado, and got pretty used to like working in the mountains, and kind of like started to notice that like I was doing a lot of the work on in kind of like poor weather days, and when some of the researchers were like tanking and stuff, I was like taking care of them. And this is also while I was like trying to become a better climber, and I had kind of learned about the climbing ranger program at Rocky Mountain National Park, and it kind of just became this like, I don't know, Shangri-La of work potential for me for whatever reason. But I never really thought I would get an opportunity to do it. But then I just kind of found myself getting like, through other jobs, I was kind of working closer and closer to Rocky until I started to make friends with some of the people involved. And then, yeah, I just kind of got this great opportunity one year where I was actually climbing down in Patagonia with some of the climbing rangers, and they encouraged me to apply. And, I had a successful season down there, and I think that kind of like fluffed me up a little bit to like get an opportunity to work for Rocky. And then, yeah, I just got a kind of a foot in the door. And
would you say it's a generally a hard job to get? Like, is it like a boys club? You gotta like know people.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say it's just like anything else really, where it's not necessarily what you know, but it's who you know. They do have things like veteran preferences and stuff like that, and you can be like a lot more attractive, so to speak. And there is a bit of a vetting process that's just federal employment in general that's kind of painstaking. But once you learn to kind of like speak that language, it's very much like who you know that really like helps you get in. And I think part of the reason that's the case is just because these are really niche work groups that are you're really intimately involved with each other, and they just want to know that they can kind of like count on each other. And so like if you trust each other, or if they trust you in like sketchy mountain environment and that sort of stuff, then they know that you're going to be competent in SAR. Yeah
I can imagine, instead of we vet our climbing partners, because safety is a huge aspect. I would imagine it's the same with just like a huge team, right? Everyone's got to be on the same page. Everyone's got to be speaking the same language. There can't be any drama. There can't be anybody freaking out.
Yeah, that's the goal at least. But all of those things happen. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You got to try to mitigation at least. You got to try to get it a little under control.
Totally
stack the odds in your favor.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's cool, man. That's awesome that you had that opportunity. It's really cool to, recognize that you had an opportunity like that, and you got to experience a job that not a lot of people, have access to. So, it's really cool, man. That's awesome for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was a dream job that kind of, unfortunately, turned into a nightmare, but now it's kind of like back to like maybe like a waking dream, a lucid dream rather. Yeah.
So what about the job did you like the most?
I mean, I thought it was so cool to be out on patrol, like as a climbing ranger. For a while, it was just kind of hard to believe that's what we were there to do. And the structure of the climbing ranger program in Rocky was it used to kind of be this. Like you weren't just on call, like a firehouse or something like that. They really encouraged all of us to get familiar with the park so that you could kind of respond to like the most technical areas as proficiently as possible. And then it was also, I think that they just like wanted us to kind of like have this like even spread throughout the park, so that if something happened, that there was like a decent chance that at least one of the anywhere from like 8 to 10 of us was nearby to be able to respond. And the kind of like helicopter response program is changing a little bit now. It's like becoming a little bit more like more heavy use with helicopters and stuff. But when I started, it was like we would only really fly if it was life, limb, or eyesight. You know, like you would. I remember actually having to like make justifications that, you know, a patient was going to die unless we flew them out, and like having to like debate with my superiors over the phone because we were really like kind of like an on foot response group for the
So
early
essentially,
stages.
you let's say you got 20 people on your team. They're like, 2 of you are going in this valley, 2 of you are going in this valley, and that way, like, if something happens in the valleys, like you guys are at least in the area to respond, or
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so like we would be carrying radios with us. We would be carrying med kits. And basically when someone calls 911 or like through word of mouth we hear about an accident, we would just kind of stop what we were doing, and go access the whoever needs help, stabilize them, and then just kind of like start the rescue from there. Yeah.
now were you allowed to like be out, like you said you know climbed the diamond, were you like able to go into these valleys and go do climbs and be in that area, and basically you'd be a response team for like people on the diamond that day, or
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I maybe took advantage of that a little bit more than others. And I don't think everyone really kind of like took the opportunity as literally as I did.
yeah.
But I mean, it was great. I've climbed fucking everything in the park that's not like, you know, 514 or X rated. So
That's cool.
yeah.
Sounds like a dream.
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, it was there was definitely several years where it was just truly incredible, and like to get to really make a difference in some people's lives was man, dude, it's super fulfilling to like be like, wow, we like totally saved that person. Like they would have fucking died had we not
Yeah.
like intervened. And that's super fulfilling. It's addictive, honestly. You start to feel like you need that to feel like fulfillment. And you start to feel like if you're not there to do it, then like no one is. And it's true and it's not true. You know, it's true in the sense that like we were the work group that was responding, but it's not true in the sense that there's a healthy number of people that are willing and capable of doing it. And you know, search and rescue always gets done. It's just the difference between good and great is very minor and underspoken, I would say. Yeah.
Is it kind of a weird, you had mentioned where like you need fulfillment, but if like you're wanting fulfillment, but that means someone else has to get injured, right? First.
Yeah.
Is that like a weird thought process you went through? You're like, okay, I want to, you know, help people, but that means people have got to get fucked up in the first place. And so you're kind of like wishing for, you know, bad to happen.
No, it's not so much that. Like, I'm not like, you know, staring at people on the summit like, oh, I hope you get hit by lightning. You know, not like that. Not like that.
When you put it that way, that's pretty
fucked up. No. It was more in the sense that like something always happens.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know, like we were 9 people, and Rocky is like one of the most heavily visited parks in the U.S. and and now it's just getting easier and easier to go in and get hurt. And we've got Long's Peak, which is like a super attractive 14er to do, and like people literally step off the plane and go to REI and suit up and boot up for Longs, like in the face of a storm, just like go for it. No, there was no shortage of it. It was more the sense that like it's just happening with such frequency and abundance that you like start, you're getting woken up in the middle of the night, and it really just feels like when you're working there, during the time that you're working there, like you always kind of have one eye open, and so you never really get enough sleep, and that starts to wear and tear on you. So by the end of the season, peak season, you're just exhausted.
Now, are you like on call 24/7, or do you like have strict days off where you're like, all right, Max, Thursday through Friday, you're not getting called?
Well, it's like Wildlands Fire in the sense that you're not necessarily encouraged, but you're incentivized to work overtime and hazard pay and night differential and all that stuff. You can really like rack up pay when you're doing, I always like to work the most like technical gnarly calls, because like you get, when you're working in technical terrain, we called it, where like the consequences of a fall were, dramatic, that like, all the pay just like adds up. And so it's super good money. Yeah. So you're kind of just like a mercenary. Yeah.
Got it. It's like, here's some work. And you're like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you get jazzed about it, you're psyched to do it,
Well, yeah, I mean, I would imagine it's like all very intense, and you get into that flow state, and it's like a full experience that you're signing yourself up for. It's like being on the front lines.
Yeah, I mean, I can't compare to that just because I don't have the experience.
I mean, figuratively, obviously.
Yeah. No, it's definitely exciting. You get excited for sure. So
I guess I'm not necessarily steering it towards like the dark side, but I definitely want to explore like the yin and the yang. What would you consider the hardest part of the job that you did that an outsider might not expect? Like, other than the obvious, trials and tribulations of the job, people can understand.
Well, I mean, there's a really obvious one, which is you see dead people. I had seen a dead person before, but it was only in passing, and you really, you see people die, and that is not really discussed like upon hire. It's just kind of assumed. And I knew that I knew the day was coming for me where I was going to have to kind of like cross that barrier and kind of get more exposure to death and to life-changing accidents. And it's a weird one, because it's kind of one of these things where like no one really knows. You never know how you're gonna react until you are put in that environment. Excuse me. And I found that I actually found that I worked quite well in really high stress environments. My kind of chill bro sounding attitude and demeanor kind of like translates to calmness in these like in these really high stress situations. And so that allowed me to kind of like really think clearly, and in times where I could, see that sometimes my colleagues would really not. But there's also this kind of, there's a slow burn to it as well. And that is what got me. And I didn't really realize the really tough thing about it is you don't really realize it's going on until you don't know when you've crossed the line until you're like way past it, and you're like, this is, it's like, I'm not normal. And I think for me, what it was is, I'm generally a very compassionate person. I kind of absorb. I've always kind of been an observer. And it's really hard for me to like compartmentalize some of these accidents and not just like be like, what was this person like? Like, what was their life like? Who's affected by their life? And sometimes you get flashed looks that just like, or you see shit that's just like, you're like, oh, that's never going anywhere. Like, I'm gonna remember that for the rest of my life. And yeah, I don't know. I could go on and on. Yeah.
Do you have any like maybe specific impactful, accident that you responded to that you're willing to share that kind of like paints the picture of what you're talking about?
Well, I think I don't want to get like too specific, just because I want to respect the people that are involved. Like, all HIPAA rights aside and stuff like that. I just I don't feel like it's necessarily my place. But I think some of the more traumatic incidents I've been a part of are, man, there's so many. I think a good way to look at it is, we all, when we're entering this world of like SAR or a really emergency response, we all have this list in our subconscious. And like for me, it's like friend, family, climber, climber I know, child, woman. You see where I'm going with this? And like, the more boxes that you check, the more that it like will have a lasting effect on you. So, I've done like climber fall recoveries on the diamond. And it was really hard for me to go back there. And I, even when I still like can, it's this, the stuff's still in your mind. You just kind of like learn how to, you just kind of learn how to hold these things a little bit better and a little bit softer, so that it doesn't just cut you every time. And it's not like burying it. It's more like you got to process this stuff. And yeah, I mean, I've had ones that really were just like so stressful, like for example, like I feel like I'm pretty good at trauma response. But medical calls I find super intimidating, because we have very little tools to kind of like diagnose stuff in the field. So when people are really sick for medical reasons in like a backcountry setting, it's like super intimidating. And there's only so much that you can do. So I've had like just like seizures at above tree line, and in the backcountry there's just like, it's like, holy fuck, dude, this is so intense, just like trying to keep a person alive and stuff like that. Searches, actually, I found super draining. Searches can be so draining, especially like when you don't find them, because it feels like, well, I actually made this mistake on the the first like big search I was a part of, where it took months to find this person. And that it feels like the only thing I could relate it to was like a cold case for detectives. You know, it's like you're so invested in this thing, but you just like can't figure it out, and you get into this headspace where you're like around every tree, around under every rock could be a body, and that that is a proper slow burn, man. That really will eat at you if you let it. And so I learned to like not get as invested in searches after that. Just kind of like do your part, and like don't overthink it. Don't destroy yourself, you know.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, it's heavy, man. It's just like just a serious profession, just to be put in all these different situations of like people dying, people already dead, people missing. It's like it's some heavy shit, and like, you know, each person going through it is like that's some serious stuff for themselves, and you're just right there, alongside them for the whole experience.
Yeah, my heart goes out to the people that do it. I in all domains, we were a niche work group that got to go climbing and stuff, but there's people in every city scraping people off of the pavement every day, and they don't get paid very much at all, and it's the nature of emergency services in our country. And I think that those people deserve more. I think that there's culturally more we could do about just kind of like recognizing that death is a part of life, and kind of better preparing us for it, because I came into the job with kind of a curiosity with death, and I feel like I just got thrown into the fucking deep end, and barely crawled out, and just like I've done a lot of like processing since then, and I'm still processing. I mean, I still don't know what the fuck happens after you die and all that stuff, but there's, like I said earlier, there's this kind of, I've got more space to kind of hold it a little bit softer, and I try not to just like pretend it's not there. I think that's like, I think that's a big mistake that we make in society, and climbing, is to just pretend that the risk isn't there. And I think it's important to kind of like be aware of the dangers that surround you. Don't let them overwhelm you and consume you. But it's foolish not to, it's foolish not to be aware that if you're on a 2-lane road and you swerve into the other lane, and you get in a head on, you're gonna die, or likely, or kill somebody. It's like, I feel like it's good to not to be grim, but
no, I mean, I think it is part of, climbing can be really fun, and it's the risk and the understanding of how exposed you are and close you are to death at times that can really freak people out and take away from the experience, right? If you were scared that you were going to die every second of climbing, no one would climb.
Right.
And so it's like that fine balance. And one way to handle it is to just completely go the other way, and just like you said, ignore the risk entirely, and just like get absorbed in the moment, and absorbed in the experience of climbing. And that's really awesome. It's super fun. But it's also really risky, because it's really easy to make mistakes, and it's really easy to slip up, and all of a sudden you're either dead, or you're in a really fucked up situation. And right. I think that's one thing that I've learned a lot is like, I'll sit there at an anchor sometimes, and I'm just like, all my weight's on the anchor, and I'm just like, you know, this rock could shift all of a sudden and poof, I'm gone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the veil and the line between in control and safe to out of control and absolutely fucked is like so paper thin
Right.
at times.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's hard. You can't think about it all the time, but you know, there is respect that you need to have for, you know, the position that we're putting ourselves in as climbers.
Totally. I mean, I think that a really tangible approach is to just kind of continuously ask yourself in the mountains, like, well, what are the consequences of this decision going awry? You know, so like, what are the consequences of, like, if I decide to make my way to that, you know, anchor unroped, if I slip there, like, would I fall to my death? Like, well, if that's the case, like, what can I do to mitigate that risk? You know, like, what are the consequences of me, like, punching it above this piece of gear? Like, if that piece rips, there be another piece below it? Or, like, you know, I think you can manage risk a lot if you're aware of it, and you can kind of like break it down into, you know, components that can be individually managed. And yeah, you never, I mean, it's an inherently dangerous activity, it's true, but like, I think that yeah, gone is my mantra of just don't fall, you know. I think that that's just naive, you know.
Now, so I think that part of risk management is our relationship and our probability in our own mind towards like coming off the wall, right? It's like, I feel like we each have our own relationship and with our connection to the wall. And I would say, you know, if you're able to read the rock and you know, climbing movement efficiently enough, you could judge like whether or not you're going to be able to do what's in front of you, right? You're like, yeah, you know, I might come off this. I'm not really sure. Or you're like, dude, I got this. This is like 100% within my ability. Do you ever, you know, if you, let's say the probability is like in your head, you're like, dude, this is 99%, like something, an earthquake would have to happen. A bird would have to come and swoop me off the wall. Like, and like, do you ever make the decision now, like in a high probability of nothing going wrong, still the consequence being death? Like, do you ever put yourself in that situation now?
I mean,
because I mean, I'll speak for myself. I do.
yeah,
I do for sure.
Yeah, I mean, this is, my wife's probably going to hear this later on, so I just, but yeah, I mean, yeah, you do. It's the reality of climbing in the mountains.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I try to manage risk as much as I can. And what I try to do is, like, subjective hazards I try to manage as best as I can, but you know, objective hazards, rockfall and stuff like that, I just, you know, you can't like trick that away.
No, for
and
sure.
so
other than just not being underneath it,
right? And so for me, it kind of comes down to this, like, well, I want to live a fulfilled life, and this is how I feel fulfillment in life. And so I don't want to deprive myself of, you know, all of the valuable things that come with growth through climbing, just out of fear of death. I mean, I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. You just, you know, just fearing death, but life would be pretty fucking boring, wouldn't it? You know?
For sure, you wouldn't be able to do much. Honestly,
yeah,
we're pretty fragile.
Yeah, you just live at home in the dark, just like, oh god, you know.
And the funny thing is, you'd probably die faster doing that than anything else.
You probably would. Yeah, stress. Yeah.
Depression.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I want to circle back on the SAR experience. I got two more things I'd like to cover. First thing is you know, I think it seems like you've definitely experienced, you know, PTSD symptoms from the trauma experienced through these experiences. And you had mentioned the word processing those experiences kind of twice. We've talked a lot about PTSD on the show. And funny enough, climbing tends to be the vehicle for processing trauma and processing PTSD. But yours seems climbing specific, right? So what was your vehicle for processing trauma and death? Like how are you and how did you manage that?
Well, when it was really bad, it actually just, it kind of just started like, well, I need to do things that make me happy. I need to do things that make me feel enjoyment for life. Like I need to see the color and the beauty of life again. And so that started with just like, oh man, I want to go outside, just like feel the sun on my face. And that, and then it was like, oh, I want to go on a walk. And then it was like, oh, I'm going to go on a run. And, I like just the feeling of going on a run in the woods or something like that. And then over time, I kind of would be like, oh, I should try bouldering again. I love bouldering. I love climbing and, just, the ease of life and the simplicity of it. And just kind of like, it's such a nice vehicle for being in nature. And so, yeah, it was just kind of this like slow, organic kind of, wading into the water again. I mean, I think really just fundamentally it's something that I really enjoy and it brings me happiness. So I just kind of had to find a way to reintroduce that into my life to get that get that feeling without causing more pain.
So you stopped climbing and SAR altogether.
Not really cold turkey. And I never really stopped climbing. I mean, I was kind of forced to out of necessity through like a series of traumatic events. But it was never really for that long of a period. But I've changed the way that I climb significantly, like, from really dramatic to like, no, I don't free solo anymore, to very subtle, like, I don't know, I try to be really intentional about the big routes that I want to do. And I really try to listen to my heart, like, and make sure that, kind of my passion is behind, my intention rather than just doing something, because I feel like I should, or, need to for merit or success or whatever.
Like a passion versus ego situation.
Yeah. I know, I'm not one of these climbers that's like driven by ego. I mean, I can't really speak for my 20s. Unfortunately, I feel like every 20-year-old male like has a little bit of chip on their shoulder.
For the course. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to get through that. But now I definitely try to be kind of more just kind of fueled by like, what are the things that I really want to do with my life, and when am I willing to kind of accept a little bit more of a challenge, in the spirit of adventure. And I mean, I think that feeling and that desire goes back to early on in my childhood when I was just, I was always kind of like really eager to just explore and kind of, just go on mini adventures,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we move on to your list of remarkable first ascents, I want to wrap up this SAR experience just with like maybe something like a lesson that people can pull from. So we talked about subjective and objective risks. You've seen a lot of accidents. Like, is there a common thread? Is there a majority of like, is there a major reason why most of these people got into accidents? Like, was it out too far on their own limb? Was it always objective hazard? Like, what was there? Was there a what's the word I'm looking for? Was there like a common thread amongst things that people could maybe extrapolate how to avoid that from?
Um, Man, I really don't think there's there's an alarming randomness to it all.
Okay.
It's
I
kind
like
of
that. An
crazy.
alarming randomness. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's I always kind of would say that like the one guarantee is that it's not going to be what we expect, you know. Um, that said, you know, I do think that I've already mentioned one of them, and that's just I think that culturally in climbing we kind of ignore the risks, and I think it'd be great to see kind of more um just awareness towards it. I mean, we're never gonna like talk people out of it. I think even from an evolutionary perspective, like it makes sense to kind of celebrate bravery and um, um, continuing in the face of adversity and stuff like that. But I think just more just awareness, I think could maybe help the youth, you know. Um, but
Yeah, it's a tough one though. I think we talked about a little bit about this on our meet and greet. It's like it's really hard to convey the seriousness of climbing's risks to someone who hasn't experienced it firsthand. Even when you witness it, in close proximity to you, it doesn't really hit the same as if it happens to you or to your climbing partner, like on the wall with you. And I even asked this to Paul Ramsden, and he agreed. He's like, you never really understand what it is that you're currently talking about until you've actually experienced it. And so it's like it's hard because you feel like these conversations, at least in risk and trying to persuade people to have these revelations, it's like almost wasted wind, right? Because it's like people are going to do what they're going to do, but at least hopefully subconsciously these conversations help promote a more positive mindset and a more risk averse mindset, and making people a little bit more aware.
Yeah. I mean, I think if there's any way to handle it, which arguably maybe there isn't, but if there's any way to handle this, just to give people a little bit more of a skill set in assessing risk, rather than necessarily saying like, oh, what you're doing is dangerous, but just like, giving people the skills, like, like avalanche education gives people the skills to be able to kind of like assess an unknown risk. And we can do that in climbing, I think, a little bit better. But yeah, no, I totally agree. There is one other pattern that I feel like I have seen in a lot of accidents. And this is something that has really affected me. And I think a lot of bad things happen when people make haste. And so, next time you're, rappelling in the dark and it's raining or a storm is coming or you're in a storm, and you're finding yourself moving faster because you want to get the fuck out of there. I think that for me now, like a light goes on in my head that says like, okay, like buying yourself a few extra seconds by moving a little bit faster could kill you, when if you just take a few breaths and move just more slowly and steadily, you'll get down maybe a few minutes later, but it can make a huge difference. And I do feel like a lot of the bad incidents I was a part of were a product of people making decisions kind of quickly to just kind of like remove themselves from a hazardous area. But sometimes
I would probably relate that like to the experience of panic or franticness, right? Like, I mean, you just kind of painted a picture of like a thunderstorm rolling on the diamond. Like, the chances of people freaking the fuck out on the wall trying to get down, is pretty high. I would imagine it's hard to stay calm in those situations, but the lesson still rings true. It's like, even you don't want to kill yourself in the process of trying to avoid death in another way.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, the most of the accidents happen on descent, and it's good to remember. It's good to leave stuff in the tank, but it's also like a lot of times we have stuff in the tank, but we just like want to get back to snacks in bed and all that, creature comforts. And I think that, it's certainly like a voice that comes on in my head, Yeah.
Nice, dude. Well, let's turn the page here and kind of switch it to a more positive note. I really want to dive into your first ascents, and we've got so many to talk about. So yeah, I mean, the first thing I want to kind of describe to extrapolate out of this is, a lot of us joke about first ascents when we're not joke, but we have, just like, me saying, I want to climb Cerro Torre, like, where are the lines? You're driving around and looking at cliffs like, oh, there's so many lines up there, bro. Like, oh, I think that crack would go. And like, there's a huge valley between doing that and actually going out and like establishing first ascents and being an adventurer in that sense. So, did first ascents always call to you? Like, when did you bridge that gap? And like, when did you, consider yourself, a true first ascensionist?
You might not know this, but I send professional recording equipment to every single guest to ensure top-tier video and audio quality. And those costs add up. Right now, this podcast is also ad-free, and I would love to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help cover shipping costs and keep this podcast ad-free, please consider joining our Patreon. With as little as $3 a month, you can help support the show. You can find the link in the description below or go to patreon.com/theclimbingmajoritypodcast. That's patreon.com/theclimbingmajoritypodcast.
And I don't even know if I necessarily still consider myself a true first ascensionist, honestly, but I think I've always been, I guess I've always kind of held it as like an opportunity to kind of test all of the skills that I've learned in climbing, to just be like, oh, let's try to create something. Let's go into kind of like an unknown, where the likelihood of success is like not determined, and I really like that kind of process of trying to kind of like fulfill a dream. And I think first doing new routes is a great way to try to do that.
So when you're choosing your objectives, like, what process are you going through? What calls to you? How do you find yourself like, all right, this is the one that we're doing? Is it random? Like, is it planned? How's that process like?
Oh man, I wish I knew. I would probably do it more.
Sounds a bit random. Sounds like it's kind of like a spur of the moment inspiration.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I think like it's interesting now. I feel like we're in this era where, very few ranges have yet to be discovered. It's very rare that you walk into a place and you're like, this wall has no climbs on it and we can just climb the weakness and we'll do a new route. It's like those days are gone. And so first ascents now are more like, oh, like here are all of the lines that are already done, and like how can I squeeze something in that hasn't been climbed yet. And excuse me, and I think a lot of the routes I've done have kind of come from that, where I was just like, oh, there's no line up this, and was like, I wonder if there's terrain that's climbable, and sure enough, most of the time there is, and that's kind of how a lot of the new routes I've done have kind of started. It's just like you're kind of curious, and you're like, I wonder if anyone's done this. And I was like, oh, no one has. And you're like, oh, maybe we should go. Maybe this is an opportunity to try out this like new route thing. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't,
Yeah. What is it like to stand at the base of a wall that has never been climbed? Is there like a magic to it?
Fuck, dude. I wish I knew, man. I've never done that. I've
never been at the base. Well, I mean,
I've stood below one wall I've stood below one kind of dinky wall in Patagonia that I don't think has been climbed, and we climbed it. And honestly, it was so small compared to its neighbors that we didn't really think much of it. We were just like tired, exhausted. We had like one day, we had like a little bit of light or sun left, so we were like, we should just try to climb this, but I am a little jealous of the generations before us that got to, walk around in Yosemite and be like, oh, like, look at this wall. Like, let's go climb up that, like, I can't even fucking imagine what it would be like to.
There's probably some stuff up in the Northwest Territories of Canada you could go to.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. See what baby girl thinks about that. But yeah.
Yeah. I just interviewed Eric and Matthew Gilbertson, twins to the tops. They're like trying to climb each country's high point.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's crazy. They've done 146 out of 196 in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so he just got back from doing this trip out into the Northwest Territories of Canada. He said he like took a bus, rode his bike, pack rafted few days on a river, and then hiked bushwhacked into this canyon. And he's like, nothing had ever been climbed. I'm like, yeah, because it took you a week to get in there.
Yeah.
It's so gnarly how far you got to go to get to these places that we're talking about of just like unclimbed walls. It's
for sure. Yeah.
It's a very far frontier.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think in a way, like some of the stuff that's more accessible now, like was like that initially, back in the day. But, yeah, maybe you just planted the seed for me to go up there. I don't know. But yeah, that's definitely a big adventure. It's tough when you're like kind of paying out of pocket for big ass trips like that,
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And family complicates it too.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
A little bit.
Working on that one.
So let's talk about the Colorado route on Fitzroy. This was a ground up on site. And apparently it was your first big FA, right? Your first main kind of one you put up?
Yeah, yeah.
Would you say it wasn't your first ascent, or was it your actual first ascent?
I think it was my first ascent that was more than like 2 pitches. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, just like, tell me the story, man. Like, walk me through the process and kind of what that was like, getting to the base pitch by pitch. Like, how did you feel? What was the climb like?
Well, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think I blew all of my luck on my first new route. Yeah, I don't think I've gotten as lucky since then, and I'm not sure if I ever will, to be honest. It was my second season going down to Patagonia, and I was, super psyched and optimistic, and I had just been kind of like poring over the guidebook on the plane ride down, and just like I was saying, I was just like looking at the red lines and being like, kind of daydreaming, like, oh, is there something in between there? And I had a couple of places that I had kind of felt like that there might be terrain to climb, and excuse me, we had a pretty good season there, and this was on the Argentinian side of Patagonia, in Chalten, yeah, just got a really good weather window to try something big. And the people that I was with, managed to kind of convince them to try to do a new route, which I think that a lot of people don't necessarily want to do that because they don't want to waste like really good weather to potentially fail on something.
Yeah, totally.
And so I think luckily, just all being like-minded and optimistic, we just kind of like decided to go for this route on the south face of Fitzroy, which is the smallest face. It's kind of like floating on a shoulder of the kind of the range, and it's just to the right of the California route. And we just kind of like threw ourselves at this pretty good looking panel of rock. And what it ended up being was fucking laser beams, man. I could not believe how splitter, and this was back when I was just like super into crack climbing. I was such a crack junkie. I just tried to fucking jam anything, couldn't crimp like worth a damn. And and this route is like maybe the most splitter, most incredible route I've ever climbed. And I'm not even really exaggerating. The thing just unraveled in our laps, dude. I could not believe it. And we just went at it with such like, youthful exuberance and optimism. And we got so lucky. Like there was a 60-meter face traverse in the middle of it. And I was like, oh yeah, like I'll just try it. And it ended up being like 5'10" and all gear protected, and was like not even that scary. And and just connected these like splitter crack systems. And man, I've gotten stumped by like 6-foot sections of rock since then. And it, we got so lucky with it that I just thought that that's how it was, and that, you could just throw yourself at something and it'll just unravel in your lap. And yeah, it's not like that. Yeah.
Now on that climb, were you like bolting anchors? Was it all clean?
Yeah, it's all gear. No
all
bolts, no pins, nothing, man.
How'd you get down?
We rappelled it's called the Franco-Argentine. It's kind of the commonly used rappel for the south side of Fitzroy.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. It's an equipped rappel. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. It goes at 11C, and how tall is it?
So starting from the shoulder to where it meets up with other established routes on Fitzroy, it's probably just about 13 independent pitches. So not that much. But it goes through a really really clean panel of rock, really beautiful panel of rock. Yeah.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah.
You got me psyched. I gotta add it to my, is it on Mountain Project? I add it to my to-do list.
No, I don't think it's on Mountain Project. It's in the guidebook. The guidebook, I think, is a better resource for Chalten. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you have to do like mixed climbing to get up to it, and mixed climbing to reach the summit. So you definitely want to like, it's not just like a splitter rock climb. It's definitely like that portion of it is like floating on a very big mountain, on Fitzroy. So, but definitely recommend it. Yeah. Yeah.
What, it seems like, we always talk about like lessons, right? We like learn things from it. It seems like the lesson you learned from it was just misguided.
Absolutely.
It's like,
yeah.
it's like things don't go as cleanly as it does.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool to get like a win like that and to have such a beautiful route just fall in our laps. But yeah, I also recognize the luck associated with that first ascent.
Well, that's good though. I think that also speaks to your guys' skills as climbers, right? It's like, yeah, sure, you had a great weather window, but you guys are, like you just kind of alluded to, it's like you guys are climbing Fitzroy. It's, not something to shake a stick at. It's a big ordeal, and to efficiently and smoothly set up an FA first try and just everything goes smoothly is like, yes, there's a bit of luck, but that's also, you guys like had things locked in and you guys knew what you were doing. So that's cool. It's really cool that you guys were able to pull that off.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it was a gift. It was a real gift. Yeah.
And so you left Patagonia, and then, I guess the next one on the list here is your FA in Zion for Humdinger. So I guess lead us from, in your mindset at the time, lead us from one to the other.
Yeah, I mean, I had really, so this was still in my splitter craze. I was really into climbing splitters, and so naturally that drew me to Moonlight Buttress and Zion, and I really fell in love with Zion for a period. It was just such a beautiful canyon, and so I climbed there quite a bit, and then eventually a friend of mine who I actually met in Patagonia, he was a guide, and he was a guide in Zion, and he was like, hey, I've been working on this first ascent, but it hasn't been freed yet. We need to kind of put it together. I was wondering if you want to come do that with me. And so over 2 days, actually it took us 2 tries. The first time we tried to do it in a day, and then we had to come back, and then we did it over a 2-day push, and we're able to free this route at it was probably like 12 plus, and quite splitter. Lot of it is characterized by a decent amount of off-width climbing, but like really splitter off-width climbing, so like kind of enjoyable. I don't know if you've like done those routes in the creek, like I think it's Big Boy or Fat Boy or something like that. I don't know. They're just like splitter offwits.
Like a kind of like a stack with a knee jam, or
yeah. Everything from like 4s to kind of like rattly 6s. And yeah, there's a lot of that on it, but good, like I'll complain about offwits too, but like these are actually like good, some good.
Now, are you the kind of offwidth climber that's just like walking the 6 for 60 meters, or are you like bringing multiple?
Maybe not 60 meters. Like maybe in a pitch like that, I would bring like 2. But yeah, I mean, I was like pretty psyched on crack climbing then, and so I felt pretty comfortable with that. I mean, it's like a top rope,
Yeah, you can just push it the whole time, and you're just like, you're not really putting a bunch of force on it if you fall or you take.
Yeah, I mean, dude, you don't want to be taking a big whipper on an offwidth, man. You get fucked up,
Yeah,
I mean,
I ain't trying to take a whipper at all, man.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
it's funny. I post a bunch of POV videos on my channel, and like someone commented, it's like, yeah, it's nice to be on top rope all the time, and it's like, that's how I climb, I'm like, I'm pretty tall, so like I could have a piece at my feet, and like I'll place a piece way above my head, and it's like, why not? It's like to me, it's the safest way to climb.
Fucking A, man. Fucking A. Yeah.
Top rope for days.
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
Nice. So that one seemed like it was another smooth one. It took you guys 2 attempts. Were you guys portaledging on the wall?
No, there's actually a pretty good ledge about halfway up that you can sleep on, and it is like an incredible bivvy, man. You have like a really nice view of I believe it's the Court of the Patriarchs or something like that. Just like beautiful Zion, so it was a real treat to kind of like get to look at that. And yeah, we did that over 2 days. And the crux climbing, like I think the hardest off width climbing goes up to about 12 minus, and then the crux climbing is like kind of like crack face kind of climby stuff.
Okay, so the 12 plus is not off width.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it hasn't been repeated. It's kind of like oh, maybe that's where you got ghost line from. Yeah.
It's a ghost line.
Yeah, it's a bit of a ghost line. The guy that I did it with, he was kind of protective of that zone. He wanted to like do more routes there, and we actually tried to do some more that ended up being kind of didn't go. And so we just kind of kept it this secret for so long, and that's like fucking like, I don't know, almost 10 years ago now, and it's like,
is the cat out of the bag now?
Well, we haven't put it on Mountain Project just because we're like kind of too lazy now. But like, I've given the topo to a couple people. Like, you should go do this. Like, it's a good route. But I think a lot of people get intimidated by all the off width on it, and they're like, "Oh."
Sounds like Mary Eden or Evan Wisherup should go out there and team up to tackle this thing.
Yeah,
They're
maybe.
like really into the off widths right now.
Yeah, I feel like there's a whole like contingent of off width climbers these days that specialize in that stuff. You do have to do some face climbing though, so it's there's that.
Yeah, it's funny, like the opposite, right? Like people avoid climbs for off widths. It's like, oh, there's face now.
Right? Yeah.
I'm not crimping. What are you talking about?
I know. Yeah.
Well, nice, man. Like, was there any like was this just another situation where it was just like another tick on the list, another FA, another great experience with not a lot of like lessons to pull from or formative experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I reached any like higher learning or anything. I think I was like proud to get it done. I had to fight a little bit harder to send the cruxes. The crux pitch is like the second to last pitch, so it felt like a little committing to like kind of like put that together, and we weren't really sure that it would go, and it kind of like felt at like the limit of my ability at the time, so it was definitely like kind of a dramatic finish to our route, but it was cool to be able to like put it together. Some feet kind of like crumbled under me while I was doing it, so hopefully, I think it still goes, but like yeah, it's cool.
Hell yeah,
That's
awesome. Yeah, if anybody's listening is looking for an adventurous climb, you should call it the Ghost Line now.
I know. I feel like it's not my my name to change, but
yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
but yeah, reach out to me and I'll give you a topo and point you in the right direction. Yeah.
Nice, dude. Well, the next one is the FA attempt on Torres del Paine. I think this is where the reality of how things can go kind of hits you.
What happened there? Dude. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like my buddy that I went down there with, and I joke that this is like one of the grandest failures of our lives, and I feel like this trip was learned. I mean, I've learned so much from just getting so beat down. But basically, I guess I had worked myself up into this mindset that if I just like put myself in front of these things and just tried them, that I could put together these big dreams, and so for whatever reason we decided to go to this place called the French Valley in Torres del Paine National Park in Chile, and tried to excuse me, with the goal of trying to do new routes on a couple of big peaks there, namely like this one called Cerro Catedral and another called Saracota 3000, or it's got a weird name. And yeah, I mean, I didn't know anything about the area, and I was like, okay, it's roughly the same latitude as Chalten on the Argentinian side. And I'm familiar with climbing there, and I've kind of got a pretty dialed kit for like how to climb there. And so I basically was just like, oh yeah, we can just use what our kind of like alpine style approach to climbing in this area. And we went down there with pretty light kit, pretty light sleeping bags, and we did bring a portaledge, but we were not really prepared, both like apparel and caloric wise for the like intensity of the Torres del Paine massif. And the weather that we experienced there was so much worse, man. It was really, really some of the craziest storms I've ever sat through. And the structure of climbing in that park is different than Chalten. Chalten's kind of like going in the way of like Mont Blanc, kind of Chamonix vibes, where it's like town is and amenities are kind of like a long walk from the climbing, and the climbing can be very serious, but the approach is really different. And we kind of went without knowing. We just went to Chile with this kind of mindset and quickly realized that wasn't going to work, that we had to kind of like get into the park, especially as a bunch of gringos. It's like the way the permitting and stuff works there is you kind of need to treat things like a real expedition. So we had to, like the Chilean government like looks at our application and stuff. They're like, are you guys fucking serious? Like, you guys are a fucking joke, so we like hiked all our shit into the French Valley and lived in a cave for a month. And just kind of periodically kept trying to do work on a new route, and just kind of like one thing after another kind of kept beating us down. We didn't even bring like much iron. I don't even know if we brought any bolts. Yeah, we just kind of were like, oh yeah, just like the Colorado splitters are just going to show themselves to me. And man, dude, we would have these like harrowing leads, just some of the most like intense leads I've ever done. And you'd like pull onto this ledge just like fully committed, and like it'd be like expecting like to get to like a hand crack in a corner, and it would be like sealed shut, like knife blade seam, and you're like, fuck, and I would either have to reverse the pitch or like pound in like some of the very few knife blades we had and lower off of those, and it just became like really clear that we just weren't equipped to climb there. But we tried. I mean, we tried really hard, and froze our asses off and starved. And I think in the month that we were there, we had maybe 4 days where we saw the sun.
Wow.
Yeah, we had like a solar panel, and like we couldn't even charge our shit with it. Yeah. So in those 4 days, we tried to do. We actually tried to repeat one of the free routes on one of those mountains, and I actually had a really intimidating fall where I like cut my rope, and it just scared the shit out of me, and so we bailed off of that.
Like down to the core. How many threads were left?
I mean, I didn't count, dude. But enough to just like scare me, you know? Yeah, I mean, like really sobering. And so we backed off of that and we're like, we were doing it super old school. We were just like, well, the sun is out or the stars are still out. Like maybe we should try to keep climbing. And that was how we ended up putting up some of these like kind of slightly more dinky new routes, like in the, far back in this cirque. We just like happened to be there. And we were like, well, at least we can attack like this face alpine style. And so we did that. And then yeah, we managed to do one more kind of like on our way out, just out of like sheer willpower. Yeah, dude, that was like the most techie slab I've ever climbed, like covered in slush, just like,
Oh my god.
because we're like, we have to do this, like, like we're so fucking bored and hungry and cold, like and like after this we can go home, so yeah. Yeah, dude, we got so beat down from that. I mean, I think we literally did starve a little bit. Like my buddy and I both had like refeeding syndrome afterwards when we got back to town. Like we both got like super sick. It took us a long time to kind of like get back to normal.
Now, what, like, I think a lot of people could have just been like, dude, fuck this, like, and like just let's get the fuck out of Dodge. Like, this is miserable. Why are we here? Like, did that conversation ever come up?
Oh
Did you
yeah,
guys ever,
yeah.
like,
I mean,
and what kept you there?
I don't know. We were like invested. We were just.
Who was there? One person that was more invested than the other?
No, I think we was like, we both wanted like to try, and to make and we were like, what the fuck are we gonna do? Like change our flights and go home,
drink beers.
Yeah, just like sit at the hostel for another 2 weeks. Like we didn't want to do that. It just felt like, I mean, I think like had we been a little bit more resourceful, we probably could have taken advantage of like and I found this out like after we came out, like we earned a little bit of street cred amongst the like locals and the guides there, and they were like, yeah, next time you come down, like hit us up, we can kind of give you bait on like, so you don't have to like suffer in a cave anymore. And I was like, okay, I get it. Yeah. But yeah, I think it was a particularly stubborn period of my life, and I suckered my buddy into it too. And he's like one of these like, is that guy Kevin Sturmer, who I mentioned earlier. Very, very stubborn, strongly willed human being. Yeah. Yeah. So bad combo, I guess.
Bad or good? It depends
bad
on what
or
you guys
good.
are going
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. I mean, it's gotten us up some stuff too,
Yeah. Yeah. So the weather, like, were you guys ever on the wall, or were you guys mostly going through the weather stuff in the cave?
Both. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just felt like every opportunity, any like moment where the weather was so bad, like anytime like it felt like you could just like walk and like do anything, you're like, wow, we may as well try to climb, but then we're on east faces, so like it would, the change was like really, really abrupt. And I've thought about this. I think part of the reason why is because it's like one of the very first like real pieces of geography that these like really turbulent storms that are coming out of like Antarctica and the ocean there. It's like one of the first big pieces of geography that they hit in that area of the world. And so the weather is just, man, it is gnarly, dude. I like
this the ferocity of the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah. I mean, I have this memory of like, I have this one particular memory where I was coming out of I like stepped out of the cave and I looked at these two walls that had been trying to climb, and in between them was this like swirling snowball. There was it, dude. It was like one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen. It's like fucking. I was like, oh my god! Like we're gonna try to like survive on a portaledge in that, like in our like shitty like alpine style like. I had like a sleeping bag that didn't even fit me because it was like, oh yeah, this is ultralight, and yeah, I mean, yeah, we were really kind of faced with a lot of decisions on that trip where we're like, if we screw this up, like we could easily get killed. And I mean, we almost did like many times. And I think, we could, since then I kind of like learned a lot of stuff and kind of got more competent with how to be able to manage a trip like that. But yeah, I think.
What were some of the other hazards that kind of like got you guys close to the edge?
I mean, rockfall was a big one.
Do you have like stuff like whizzing past you while you were on the wall?
Oh yes, all the time.
Fuck
yeah,
that, man.
it's like feels like a firing range. I mean, that's the reality of climbing on those mountains is they're falling apart, and that's a lot of these like glaciated ranges. That's just a reality. Is they're
So how do you
falling
justify that kind of objective hazard? Like,
apart.
to me, that's just like fucking playing Russian roulette, right? It's like, even if you see it coming, what the hell are you gonna do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it also just happens to be in the terrain that is like the most inspiring ranges on Earth. It's just the reality of the world we live in right now. It's like these. We're talking about like faces that are like 4,000 feet of vertical relief of like granite wall. That's like really inspiring to a lot of people, and it was inspiring to us. And so I think that's what draws a lot of people to these places, is to try to like test themselves against these like really big walls.
Did you ever get hit by anything?
I mean, yeah, but nothing that like knocked me out or luckily. Yeah, but it's like it literally sounds like it's like like shit like buzzing by you all the time. And yeah, like I said, I get my rope cut, and the rock there is it's really like, in terms of like geologic time, it's like really freshly fractured. So it's really sharp. It's really, really sharp rock. So you got to be like really on point about managing like edges and stuff like that. It just destroys your gear. Yeah.
Wild, man. Yeah, it's hard I've never been down there, and it's hard. Like I hear stories about Tyler Caro being down there, and like it seems like there's a lot of people heading to Patagonia that are at least on social media, so like that experience at least is becoming more normalized. But definitely a wild place.
Yeah, it's very glam right now. A lot of people are into it. I mean, dude, it's like anywhere you fucking point a camera, it's like amazing photo. It's like, I think that's why people like ice climbing, because it's like you just snap a photo, you're like, wow, that's amazing. Like,
that's a dangerous game though, chasing things that are dangerous because they look good.
For sure, but we're it's also what inspires us, right? I mean, like I saw Cerro Torre too and was like, holy shit, like that is an amazing mountain. That is so inspiring. Like it's a climber's mountain for sure, and it's definitely the stuff that attracts us to going and trying these things. But yeah, there is an undeniable, slightly more kind of objective hazards associated with climbing in those areas. Yeah, for sure. It's a reality.
Nice, dude.
Yeah.
I think I want to steer it towards your FA, your most recent one, kind of the one that we started with in the very beginning, talking about with Climbing Mag and the Wind River Range. So I guess what was a precipice towards kind of switching to that area? Had you been there before? How did you stumble upon this route that you put up?
Um, well, I guess I guess it kind of like, well, I had been climbing a lot in the Wind River Range. It's not too far from us. It's about 8 hours away. Um, so it's kind of like just a different version of the Rockies. And I'd always kind of been attracted to that. There's definitely really just beautiful cirques and peaks and walls out there that are super inspiring. And so I had been kind of periodically visiting different areas in that range for for several years, and just in the spirit of trying to see something new, decided to go out and check out the monolith cirque, and with the intent of repeating a route that was fairly recent. It had just been put up several years prior, and I remember when we were out there, looking up at the wall and kind of being like, wow, there's like, this is a huge wall, and there's not many routes on it. Like, I feel like this is kind of like one of these rare opportunities where it's kind of open country. Um, and the winds are a little bit deceptive at times in that respect, because a lot of really able-bodied climbers have been climbing there for a long time, but the spirit of that place is always kind of really to underreport, and so you really kind of have to like do your research and kind of like get in touch with the people that are familiar with the areas to really get an idea of what's been done there, and and so after doing a little bit more research, kind of figured out that there actually was more open terrain to do new routes, and over the course of a year, kind of worked on some friends and managed to convince one to go out there with me to try to put up a new route. And this was a kind of like an interesting trip, because the person I went with is predominantly an aid climber. She's a really talented aid climber, and I've always been kind of more of a free climber. And we were like, okay, we're not really sure how this is going to go. We've never really climbed together. I mean, we're both competent, but let's just like kind of attack the wall and just see what we can do. And it's like, if we were just like, we kind of had this like pre-existing agreement, like if the terrain is easier for one of us to move up, we'll just like give the lead to that person, and we'll switch when it makes sense to transition. And so we just kind of like kept that mentality and just like worked away at this new route, ground up. And over the course of 2 weeks, we managed to establish this 14 pitch line. And on all of the pitches that were aided, I would like clean on rappel, and if I needed to, place a bullet or two. And I managed to free all of them except for one, the ninth pitch. Just we ran out of time, and weather was moving in, and the pitch it kind of seeps. It's like a seam, like a beak seam. And so I just wasn't able. I tried to do it on mini traction, but I was like, man, if I can't do this now, I don't want to put bolts in, because like, I was like paranoid that someone was going to come and fire this thing like while I was gone, So I was like, you at least have to be able to climb the like A3 seam if you want to like free this thing, And so we left it undone, and 2 years go by before I could return, and now I have a daughter, and just this past summer, so we had this definitely like a shortened trip because of family obligations and stuff. myself and a buddy and a friend who's a photographer who wanted to kind of like capture some of the ascent. We went out to with the main goal of freeing that pitch, but I obviously we wanted to get the full like in a day free ascent. But yeah, just kind of like one kind of mishap happened after another, some that were in our control, some that were out of our control. And it just kind of like the trip kind of kept kind of unraveling in our hands until like the very last day, where it was like, okay, this is kind of like do or die. We have to kind of try to free this last pitch. And yeah, managed to squeak it. And yeah, we have this complete near route, and I think a friend kind of got wind of it and wrote that nice fluff piece, and here I am.
Hey man, everyone deserves at least a little fluff.
Yeah. Why not, right?
It's awesome though.
Yeah.
Congrats, man. Yeah, it's crazy. That's a crazy story to come back to a same climb like for such a long time. And it's how was it coming back to that route after so long? Like, did you have to like reacquaint yourself with it? Like, was that kind of like a
little bit
mental process to go through?
Yeah, a little bit. I was definitely like, oh, that was fucking bold, man. Yeah, it's like, there's definitely it's not like it's not a rinky dinky sport climb, as they say. And yeah, I mean, I think the conditions made it a little bit more exciting too. Like we got this like really weird grapple storm in the middle of our trip that just like coated the wall in grapple. And grapple is like, it's like hail before it like hardens. So it's like, it feels like kind of like styrofoam bits. It's just like tons of that. But it took longer to melt because of that. And so like the wall was just like really quite wet, and we were running out of time. So I had to kind of like do a lot of the easier pitches to kind of like access that ninth pitch wet. And that was intimidating. It's just like, yeah, lichen when it gets wet is just like very slick, and the crux pitch was wet, but it wasn't like unworkable. And we cleaned it and like brushed it and ticked it, and yeah, just somehow was able to kind of like squeak it this time. Yeah.
What kind of climbing was it, the crux pitch?
It's like it's kind of like a seam, like but you can't like, yeah, you can't really get finger locks. You're kind of like grabbing the edges of the seam, and kind of like techie feet. It kind of like is a little bit of a bulge. Like the hardest bit is kind of like on the edge of the basketball kind of thing. Yeah, I think like maybe like, I don't know, like 13B, something like that. Yeah. I had like done some routes like kind of that grade, maybe a little harder earlier in the summer. So I felt like it was kind of around that range. Yeah.
And that pitch is bolted?
It's got some bolts on it, but like the hardest bit is bolted, but the start you have to like play some pretty techie gear, and I think the last 20 feet is protected by like 2 knife blades. That I think that they're gonna stay there. I mean, I think that's a really common thing in the winds is like iron kind of, because of the intense freeze thaws, like they'll fall out. But I really made a point out of like placing them with the intent of them like kind of staying in there, like kind of like cammed in a little bit more. So the goal is that like it was to like set up a route that like you can go in without a hammer and hike in and repeat the route,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where do the ethics lie there? Like, because it could be, I think it would be, it depends on person to person, obviously, but like I could see it being, tempting to be like, oh, this gear is like, it's kind of weird. It's really techy. It's kind of thin. Like, I don't even know if it's going to hold.
Mhm.
Let's just put a bolt here.
Mhm.
Like, so what are your kind of justifications for choosing when and when not to bolt?
I mean, like my main motto is like scare him, don't kill him. And I didn't come up with that. But I like it. I think it's a good kind of mentality. It's like, it's good to keep climbing exciting. It's good to, I don't think anyone really likes like grid bolted stuff that you can just like A0 up. I like it. I like it when you actually have to climb in between. But yeah, I mean, I'm not a head point climber. I don't put up routes that are just like horror shows that no one will ever repeat. And as far as like bolts versus peckers and knife blades and stuff, I think a lot of routes can be done on peckers and knife blades that are actually quite solid, but I just kind of noticed that like over time, when these routes get established, it's like all fine and dandy for the first ascent party, and yeah, they can claim like good ethics of like not placing bolts and stuff like that. But for anyone to go repeat those routes, they essentially need to like put in the same effort as a first ascent party. And when I was first going to the winds, like that was the intention. People wanted to do that. People wanted to kind of preserve the that feeling of doing new routes and stuff. But I think the hubris of man has perhaps kind of made it so that people don't really want to put in first ascent effort for like repeat credibility, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
And I noticed that just like a lot of these routes just don't get done. And I kind of wanted to, I've got a lot of routes that people don't do, don't ever repeat it. And I kind of wanted to create something that maybe people would want to repeat, so that was what I thought.
Do the local, seems like there's a local group of people in the winds that are kind of like protecting the area. Like, would they agree with kind of like your mentality of how you set that route up?
I mean, I think local is a pretty broad sense of the term. There's Lander, and that's a bit of a climbing town, but, and there's always someone you're going to piss off. And
yeah, because I've heard from other guests where like someone posted some stuff about their climbs in the wind and like they got just like ripped apart online, just like, you're not supposed to talk about this stuff, blah blah blah.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Did you like experience anything like that from like your time, especially, I mean, this climbing piece in the magazine? Like, did you get any heat for that coming out?
No, actually not.
Nice.
I wasn't even aware of that. I have climbed in places where it's like Fight Club. You don't talk about it. But
yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like that's justified in certain areas, or do you feel like it's a dying mentality that kind of like needs to be removed from the climbing culture?
I feel like some areas just can't sustain heavy increase in visitation, and so when you like put something on the internet for everyone to access, you kind of like expose it to becoming like in vogue and becoming very popular very quickly. And so I think sometimes people will try to protect an area from that kind of rapid, unsustainable development. And I can certainly respect that. And there's some places that I've been to that really preserve this kind of feeling of adventure, which I really like. I think you kind of have to dig a little deeper and kind of do a bit of a scavenger hunt, like. And when you really start looking and asking questions and the right people, like, they're generally pretty friendly to to share information about it, but it just takes that tiny bit extra effort that like vets this just kind of like unhinged surge of visitation that can just like wreck a place really quickly. So
yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
I could see that for sure, especially for, I guess this is probably a smaller scale, but like for certain crags or whatever, it's like while you're developing it, while you're like trying to establish it, while you're enjoying it because it's your backyard and you're putting the work in, like, yeah, keep it on the low. Like it's, you're the one putting the work in, you're the one who found it. So it's totally fine to kind of keep it to yourself. And then I guess it's on you to choose when you want to kind of move on and leave it to the masses, essentially.
Yeah. And I think that there's healthy ways to do it. And I mean, again, I don't think you need to be an asshole about it. And I think there's plenty of occasions where people are overly protective, and people just like don't want things to change because it was like so much better in the good old days. And I honestly, I think all that's kind of bullshit. And I think it just kind of comes down to people just like not wanting to be forgotten. But I do think that it's maybe a tactful approach for kind of like preserving the mentality of a place,
Mm-hmm. And it's also too, it's not like it's off limits to everyone, right? It's like like you said, like you were an outsider and you came in and you did your research, you showed up, you showed respect for the area, and here you are, putting up a route in an area like that. So
yeah, I mean, it's just like it's just the difference between like Google searching when you're like sitting on the toilet versus like going to the gear store in Lander and being like, hey, like, can you tell me about this? And they'll tell you, and point you in the right direction. It's like, it's not like it's like you're like Indiana Jones, like searching for the hidden treasure or anything like that. It's like,
you got to watch out for the tribal people.
Yeah,
in the canyon.
It's not that bad.
Yeah. Well, nice, dude. I think, I'd like to close out the conversation with just a bit of just kind of like, I don't know, reflective questions, kind of like, to kind of close it out. Do you have like a legacy that you'd like to leave behind? Like as a climber, cause you are, we talk about things that, you leave behind as a person, right? This podcast is an example of that. Like who knows how long, these conversations will live, but, the climbs that you set up out there, will be there, essentially forever. Like, is there anything you want to leave behind in terms of your name and what your routes say about you?
No, I mean, I think if anything, like what I would like to leave behind is like, just like, oh yeah, he's a good person, he was a good dad, good partner, good loving husband, brother, son, father, I mean, I think it's cool. Like putting up roots is like, yeah, maybe it extends your lifetime, like the last time your name is said, maybe by a couple of years. But I think what really matters is being a good person,
What about a lesson that climbing has taught you that you would not have learned anywhere else?
Well, I mean, I don't know about anywhere else, but climbing has taught me a lot of lessons. It's taught me to appreciate life. It's taught me to be grateful for what I have. It's taught me how to realize dreams, and how to overcome difficulties, amongst other things. Yeah.
What would you be doing if you weren't climbing? If climbing never came into your view, what do you think you'd be doing?
I try to find something. I don't know. I mean, there's like a lot of different things that I would, but I think, I mean, regardless of what it is, I'm a bit of an existentialist. I do believe in having some sort of purpose to keep you out of the despair. I think that's important. Yeah, it doesn't matter what it is, but yeah. Despair is not worth it. Yeah.
What about the climbing community as a whole? Do you like what do you feel like? What's one really good aspect that you've seen in the climbing community, and what is something that we could do better?
Man, it's tough because the climbing community as a whole is just so massive now. But I think one thing that's good about it is this kind of like unifying component. It doesn't always do this, but it has the capacity to kind of create a sense of belonging. I think that's good. I think that maybe something that we could do better as a climbing community is just maybe just kind of recognizing that for whatever reason, we're a bit under a spotlight in terms of like outdoor recreationists. People are watching what we're doing, and if they don't like it, they sometimes can have the capacity to like take it away from us. And so, this is something I was always kind of taught living abroad, is that like, yeah, you're an American abroad. In a way, you're a mini ambassador of your country. You represent to other people like your country, and you don't want to give off this impression that we're just like, complete lunatics. And so with climbing too, I feel like maybe recognizing that, it's not all about you is something that's maybe a good practice for all of us.
One bad egg could definitely ruin it for the entire community if you piss off the wrong person, right? Because isn't there a crag that just closed in Colorado? There was like a big portion.
I'm sure. I heard there was like a really big closure in the Red River Gorge recently.
That's where it was. Yeah, that's where it was.
Yeah.
That's
And the
Kentucky, right?
the Grampians just had, I believe it was the Grampians just had a bunch of big blanket closures, and some of this stuff is like not really in our control, but like I think it certainly helps when you have this like kind of history and legacy to look back on. Like it's like, look, we care, and we have proof, and like, so listen to us, kind of thing. I think that can help us for like management in the future, because while it seems like there's rock everywhere, there is like a finite amount of it, and these big inspiring places are limited. So it's like we have to kind of like learn how to get along,
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. I really appreciate your time. I think our conversation was deep and impactful, and I really appreciated sharing and being able to capture your story.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I mean, it's pretty wild. I've never done a podcast before, so this is a cool experience, and it's cool to meet you, and maybe we can meet in person one day.
That would be awesome, man. Yeah, I want to take you up on your offer for the diamond. It's been on my
for sure.
list for a long time.
Yeah. I'm a good. I will spray you down, man. Yeah.
Nice, man. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, dude.
That concludes today's episode, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. It really means a lot to me that you're here. If you liked today's episode, please be sure to rate and review the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This simple gesture helps the algorithm share this podcast with new listeners. Please also share this podcast with your friends. Word of mouth is honestly the best way to support the show. Also, if you're psyched about what we're doing here at The Climbing Majority, please reach out. DM me via Instagram or email me at theclimbingmajoritypodcast@gmail.com. I want to hear from you. And don't forget, you can watch our full episodes on YouTube. Stay tuned for our next episode, where I sit down with the legendary Creek Freak, Devin Finn. Until then, keep exploring, stay safe, and as always, thanks for being a part of The Climbing Majority. I will see you all in 2 weeks.